it's simple little adjustments that we can do in our day-to-day lives that really do add up and I think make the biggest difference. It's just a matter of you gotta freaking pay attention. If you're not willing to
Mm,
pay attention, if you're not willing to like become more sovereign in your
mm,
decision making of the way that you inhabit yourself,
mm.
you will probably get jacked up. Statistically speaking, that's not an absolute. You'll probably get jacked up though. So it's just like you just gotta pay attention. And in the stuff to shift is like so darn simple. And that was the whole function of the line method.
There goes a sight from my soul. Welcome to the Inspired Evolution. And it is a humble treat to be here today. We have with us Aaron Alexander. Aaron, how are you there, brother?
I'm good, man. I just burning some Palo Santo wood. I like that we're both wearing our winter garments here. Got our winter hats on. This is very cute. We're matching
Yeah.
almost. This is very pleasant.
Well, I got the memo from your team, so I had to follow suit, right? So,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
for those tuning into Aaron for the first time, he is a pioneering manual therapist, as they put it. But really, he's written the book on the Align Method. He's the creator of the Align Method, and he's the host of the Align podcast, which I think ranked number 1 in nutrition on iTunes, actually. So you're doing some really amazing things out there as the world as a movement coach. What prompted your journey into what, like, align is a very big word, can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Mm.
I love now, having dived deep into your work, kind of how you dance with that word. Obviously, it's physical, it's mental, it's in some ways it's even spiritual, right? But I'm sort of programming your answer to sort of feel into where did the word align first start, coming into your awareness and going, actually, this is the heart of really what's most important to Aaron Alexander.
Well, Align started off as just me. So my background was physical training and then Rolfing, which is a form of manual therapy. I described it as
Mm,
like manual therapy meets physical therapy.
mm,
And then various different modalities of hands-on manual therapy, which is like
mhm,
massage, body work, things of the sort. And the Align I mean, it really is like 25 years old and is starting a manual therapy clinic in a place called Bend, Oregon. I moved from Boulder, Colorado.
mm,
And I think I just coming up with names, man. I don't think it was that like deep or meaningful.
mm,
But the intention of structural integration or
mm,
Rolfing, which I don't think too many people would know what that is exactly, but
mhm,
structural integration, it's if people have heard of the term fascia or
mm,
connective tissue. It's this really intelligent connective tissue that weaves throughout the entirety of our body. It wraps every muscle and blood vessel and artery and nerve and all the different parts. And it's essentially these like pressurized bags that contain the organization of our bodies. Many people think
mm,
of the physical body as being like 640 muscles and 206 bones and all of these like individuated stuffs.
mm,
But the concept of working with fascia or connective tissue is really about the connection of all of that. And the body doesn't know the difference
mm,
between these individuated systems. It just knows, relationship of the whole. And so when working with a client or patient or whatever, for to structure or integrate their structure, essentially what you're doing is you're aligning their body. So I was like, oh, align works out. But then obviously, maybe not obvious to some people. Um, the body is a representation of your feelings and your thoughts. And, if you move yourself into a state of fear or a state of shame or a state of glee or any of that stuff, like your physical body expresses those positions. And we can get trapped and not even realize in certain structural postural positions that are associated to the way that we relate to others, the way that we relate to our kids, the way that we relate to ourselves. So then it kind of trickles out into like aligning your mind, body, all the things.
Thank you so much for sharing that. The piece in there that really struck me, like I've been carrying this awareness for a minute, and when I found your work, it was like, oh, okay, now the sort of tether on the thread on the tapestry, I can start to pull at, and things are just going to start uncoming, which was actually really poetic for me to come across your work. Is Do you know what a mudra is, bro?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had this
Like
awareness.
like spiritual gang signs.
Precisely. Right. Yeah, but the intention behind the mudra is that they sort of, when you're connecting to a particular type of mudra, a particular type of energy is being cultivated in your system, and having a meditation practice, having explored mudras quite deeply, I have a massive affection for them. And
Hmm.
slowly but surely, this awareness started to precipitate over some time that my whole body is actually a mudra at any given
Hmm.
time. I'm
Yeah,
walking
that's
around
true.
and it basically cultivates a certain type of energy depending on how it's locked in, how it's open, where and this expression that you're describing is how you're feeling inside is a direct, like your body's like a printout almost of what's going on inside. And you can actually, it's a
Hmm.
two-way street. You can manipulate, well, not manipulate, but you can influence either, like to send cascades and ripples in the other direction as well. Has
Yeah.
been, it's a really profound awareness to have. And yet I've had that awareness for a minute, but I've not known what to do with that awareness.
Hmm. I don't think you
And
need to do
going,
too much with it.
yeah. So you
I don't
think
think you. I
what?
don't. You don't want to get too wrapped. Like if a person gets too wrapped up in what they're doing, they're going to be almost in like a semi dislocated version of themselves. So
Mm,
if you're overly aware of like body language when you're talking to somebody, and you're like,
mm,
okay, what do I do with my hands to like impress this person? Like my eyebrows, you get too robotic. So that's, gets into like flow state and all of those things. It's kind of like you're in a mental orientation where you
mm,
are just, you're in the flow of
mm,
being. And I think the way that a person gets into a natural, quote unquote, natural state of ease and flow and words like that comes from intentionally coming back, doing the training to
mm,
get the body into an orientation that is, quote unquote, aligned or
mm,
balanced or centrated or integrated or neutral or whatever word
mm,
you want to identify with, just balancing joints and connective tissue. And practice weightlifting, practice running, practice dancing, practice improvisation. Go to one of those, whatever they call those, like what's it called when you go to do the speaking events? They like teach you to speak. It's like a Toastmasters,
oh, yep.
stuff like that. You get those repetitions
Mm,
of being yourself, your quote unquote self, enough times. You just put yourself out there and you become vulnerable and expose yourself to various different conditions, and then eventually like this you-ness starts to come through. So I think that if you just read a book and about postural feedback or things of the sort, you're like, okay, here's the cues that I do to like express myself the most confidently or
mm,
whatever. It's like weird. I think a person becomes confident by living a confident inducing lifestyle. Confident
mm,
inducing lifestyle consists of doing hard shit,
mm,
and you're just like, cool, like I've exposed myself to so much. Confidence just exudes through my body because I've been through this.
mm,
So I think that sometimes like the body language fake it till you make it thing can get a little funny. It's like if you're not confident because you haven't gotten the reps in, you're not gonna like fake your body language into suddenly upregulating the right cocktail of neurochemicals or hormones to
when
make
you
you
need
suddenly
it.
just be good at stuff. It's like the confidence comes from actually doing the work. Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit because there's a piece deep in your book that I really relate to, which has been a. It's actually where I've gotten stuck in the book and I haven't actually finished it, which is I just
Nice.
acknowledge that here on the
It's always
podcast.
it's always it's always good to hear.
Is this?
The book's not even written to be. You could read it front to back, but you really don't need to. The intention with writing the align method was,
Mm,
and I literally did this multiple times, like probably hundreds of times, was to be able to open it up at any page and
mm.
within one paragraph get some actionable like piece
Takeaway.
of information, takeaway that you're like, cool, like I'll just do that today.
Mhm.
So no worries if you're trying to read it front to back. The intention really was to be able to open up any page and be able to get value from it.
Yeah, it's more recently these days I've noticed I'm really good at reading, so I can read things front to back, but that doesn't mean I'm
Yeah.
digesting, I've noticed. And now I've
Yeah. Right.
started building this art around like actual digesting the content. And if that calls
Yeah.
me to stop at a certain point and actually just be with a body of work, that's kind of where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
where I'm at is this point where you actually shared on your journey. And I've had this awareness for me recently that I've been going to the physio a little bit, checking things out, and they're like, dude, you're really stiff. Like you're really stiff. Like you're obscenely stiff. And it's like, yeah, but like I work out like 3 times a week. I look after myself. I do a lot of stretches, a lot of yin yoga. Like I'm getting in, all the right stuff. They're like, yeah, but you're really stiff. Like
Mm-hmm.
especially if like your mid back and your upper neck and shoulders, like and I've had this awareness that it's probably emotional or tension or something going on in there. And then in your book, you've got these 5 archetypes. You've got the anxious
Mm-hmm.
person and so on and so forth. And then you mentioned the swole archetype. And the way you described it, it was like when you were writing about yourself, but I related so deeply to like, oh, I remember when I was a fat kid, not this was your story, but I was a fat kid in high school and how
Yeah.
much going to the gym helped me emotionally build a bodybuilder persona, build an identity that actually I'm good, I got this,
Yeah.
and how reliant upon that structure I became and still am to today that like yep like that's the body that I hold. And even the little bits, and this is how beautifully the book's written, it's like the thing you've got to work on, bro, is notice that you're posturing and boom, your lower back, what's it doing while you're posturing? And it's like, yeah, dude, it's kicking out. Like it's
Yeah.
actually kicking out. I can feel myself duck bumming, and then you're like, yeah. So and then the exercises are just so simple. It's just like, dude, just spin and tap like your limbs, like just go for it, and just
Yeah.
loosen up, just loosen up. And I think and I stopped there because it was like, shit, like I could easily glaze past this and know this is a body of work for me to do, or I could literally just go, this is my body of work for the next minute or two. Right. And I'm
Mm.
gonna just sink into this and just allow it to do
Cool.
what it needs to do for me. And so that's where I'm at. But yeah, just I'd love for you to sort of describe, because I think for so many people, like confidence, going to the gym fitness is such a big part. There's a whole industry around that, right?
Yeah.
And yet it may not be serving you in the way that you think it's serving you. Can you describe that a little bit and maybe even leaning into your own story and experience in that?
Yeah. Well, I think like what you're describing, like most things are highly nuanced.
Mm,
Most complex topics, such as say a person that is compensating in the form of physical fitness to feel more confident about themselves.
mm.
That's like a good thing in most ways, in a lot
Most
of
ways,
ways. You
95% of the
know,
ways, let's say. Yeah.
yeah, and then there's the core, but it really comes down to like the core of like it's not your how, it's your why. So the how in that is like, cool, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to get objectively healthier, my
Mm.
cells are going to work better, I'm going to now be
My
more
mood's going to
metabolically
be
adapted, I'm going
better.
to have more
Yeah.
muscle, my mood's going to be better, I'm increasing brain derived neurotrophic factors,
Yeah.
like thinking better, more neurogenesis, more all of the good shit.
Mm.
um and then along with that, there's the root level of saying like, okay, well, why are you doing this in the first place? Is it coming from a place of um like a deeper nut to crack than just once I'm jacked or just generally fitter, I'll start to develop love for myself and like acceptance of myself? Because I think you can trip upon deeper self-acceptance and love, and that deeper feeling of like ease just through doing hard things.
Hmm.
And oftentimes you just keep compensating.
Mm.
And that's what I think it's more common for people to keep on compensating. I think they are different directions, and
Mm.
typically the direction of actually getting to the root of why a person perhaps does have this ongoing gnawing sensation of like a lack of self-acceptance, perhaps, or maybe a feeling of like a void feeling inside that they don't know how to address exactly. But when they go exercise, they feel temporarily a little bit better, and then it starts to come back, and they do something else. So within that, I think it comes into like talk therapy and somatic based therapy and different forms of dance, perhaps, and different forms, maybe like meditation, journaling, relationship. Like there's so many more like yin ways to go into the
Mm.
body, where to start to unravel some of those deep typically wounds that manifested themselves typically in childhood,
Mhm.
and be able to create the spaciousness to start to address those parts, as opposed to just creating reinforced shielding and just
Mm.
continue to shield eventually. And then the issue with that is the shield is applauded. The shield is what you see on front of Muscle and Fitness. The shield is what you're going to put on your Instagram posts. You'll get way more comments if you're looking like super jacked and tan on
Mm.
there, typically. And so that's the thing, is culture, generally speaking, is going to be applauding the shield.
Mm.
And there's not a lot of there's more now. There's kind of like, I think, almost like a movement of sorts, but just authentic vulnerability, of, I feel alone sometimes, I feel sad sometimes, I feel hopeless sometimes, I feel, like more of the, Arnold Schwarzeneggers of the world. If they were talking about stuff like that, I think there would be a much more, and not in a contrived way,
Mm.
I'm doing this because I think I'm supposed to. It's like, no, you're just generally being vulnerable with your human condition.
Mm.
We probably live in a much less tense, like from a musculoskeletal contractile, like nervous system lens, like a much
Yeah.
less tense world. But I think there's a lot of protection in the form of fitness. So that was a lot of words. I just think it's like both. Like, go to the
Mm.
gym, work it out. You feel, you don't love yourself. Maybe in some ways it's like, yeah, you're a fucking fat bastard. Like, you don't
Mm.
get outside. Like, your cells are shit. You're backed up. You're
Mm.
congested. Like from like a cellular level, you're
Mm.
pale. You're not getting enough sun. Your hormones
Mm.
are in the gutter. You don't have that, you're like, your body's atrophying. Like, yeah, like, how could you feel good? Like, of
Mm.
course you're
Mm.
degenerating this beautiful miracle of an instrument. Like, of course you feel like shit.
Mm.
So there is a part of like, yeah, get out there and get it, buck
Mhm.
up. And then there's the other part of like, okay, now let's also kind of massage and address those deeper parts of the body so you can get jacked, or generally fit, and also cultivate a sensation of, self-acceptance and love and all the things. They're two different tracks though, but they
Mm.
also kind of coincide on occasion.
Yeah, because that was going to be my question. I can hear you saying that there's this whole yang path and there's this whole yin path in need of probably, well, that's just what I heard you sort of describing it, and the yang sort of being the action and the doing, and the yin being the being and the sort of soaking back into the nothing, like just being present. Um,
Yeah.
do you find, because you've worked with a lot of people, bro, do you find at the moment that there's a need for one more over the other, or it's tailored to each individual in terms of
It's
like, do you think,
all individual. Some
yeah,
people are too
ha-
soft. Some people are
mm,
too victimy. Some people are too, oh, I did this, and I'm a piece of shit and all of that. Like, that's great. Vulnerability. I just did a podcast with a guy called Gabor Mate,
yeah,
who he's, brilliant in all sorts of ways. And we've actually done several, but we just were recorded like, it was like 5 days ago. So it's fresh. But so the word vulnerable, I believe the original, I think it's like Greek meaning or something, comes down to like being available to be wounded. So
mm,
being, if you're in that position to be soft and open to be wounded, you're soft enough to heal. So
mm,
there is a place where it's like, you got to be soft, you got to be vulnerable if you want to change. If you don't want to change, don't be soft, don't be vulnerable, close it up. But if you're in a place of like actual acceptance of like, damn, I'm not doing this right. Like, there are parts of my relationship, parts of my business, parts of my inner self-talk, parts of, just my general, the way that I relate to the world. It's like, it's not quite, infallible. Well, then
Mm,
it probably wise to come into a place of vulnerability, and say like, shit, like, how can I improve? How can I do better? Man, I fucked that up. Like, I hurt that person. It's not their fault. Like, it was, I did that.
mm,
And so being able to come to that place, that allows a person to grow. And then also, because there's nuance to everything, you can get yourself in this endless pit of all the ways that I'm a naughty boy, and I'm bad and I'm hurt and I have my trauma. And it's just this endless freaking trauma cycle. And then
mm,
in some ways, like, dude, buck up, go like jump in the cold plunge, go take up wrestling or boxing, hit a bag,
mm,
just like, come on now. You're
mm,
not just a puddle of vulnerability.
mm,
And that is the balance of masculine, feminine, yin, yang, black, white, moon, sun.
mm.
But if you get too much in any one direction, it starts to create, dis-ease of some sort.
Yeah. Talking about disease, I've heard you mention normalcy is a disease, and it stuck for me. And I've loved the essence of that for a while, like just the idea that everybody is meant to be this cookie cutter thing. And I think when you, even in your response just then, when you described the opportunity to be better, oftentimes we look outside of ourselves for what's better. So it's like I may turn around and go, Aaron moves, in a better, has better movement patterns than my body does. That's better. And I start automatically sort of lynching into, okay, or lynching in, like hooking into, um, trying to seek an element of better outside of me that I can then be inspired by. But now I'm also then disenfranchised myself from myself once again, right? Can you describe
Hmm.
that process a little bit? Because I think that's very prevalent. We do that a lot. Do you see that a lot?
I don't think that I've, not to correct you, but I don't think I might have, but I don't think I've ever said normal is a disease, because I typically like avoid absolutes.
Mm.
So I don't think I actually said that, unless I might have been high or something. I'm not sure. Um, but generally, I don't think that that would come out of my mouth in such an absolute way. But generally speaking, I would say, statistically speaking,
Mm.
normal seems to be trending in a place of obesity, or at least increased obesity, anxiety, self
Mm.
harm, um, like all of the things. It's like not, super ideal,
Mm.
diabetes, and all the stuff. So it seems like whatever we're doing as a whole, we're on a track. If we just allow ourselves to be like dust in the wind of modernity,
Mm.
we're going to get jacked up. I believe. And that's because the way that the human body for millennia has been able to regulate itself is through movement outside. So
Mm.
now we've outsourced a lot of that movement to machines, which is cool. Humans are super smart. It's amazing. We've developed this
Mhm.
big prefrontal cortex. We're great analytical, pragmatic thinkers. We're, the king of the food chain. So that's amazing that we did that, but we almost did it like too well.
Mhm.
And then also we've become overly, I would say overly, based off of, if you're looking at statistically, it just depends on what your goals are. If you want your hormones to be a little funky, and you want to be a little pale, and you want to be a little fat, and you want to be a little depressed, and you want to be a little anxious, like, have at it. Like, I'm not to judge anyone, but
Mm.
if you spend all your time inside, you're asking for it. Like, the body
Mm.
needs sunlight. You essentially are running on sunshine. If you pull sunshine out of the system, things are going to start to go flat. And so if you're inside of a house all day long, and you're behind these double pane windows that are blocking out, I think it's typically the UVB spectrum of the light. Don't quote me on that. But it's blocking out some degree of the full spectrum of light. You're breathing, air conditioned air, which has an interesting effect with the ionization of the air particles. So it makes it like just like less electric, less vibrant.
Mm.
You think of your air almost like water.
Mhm.
Distilled water is not the same as drinking spring water.
Mm.
Um, it's
Yeah,
not the same as adding some
significantly.
minerals to your water. It's
Yeah.
not the same as drinking swamp water. Like, air is not just air. The
Mm.
difference between walking and breathing through your nose, which that's another thing. There's a lot of people that breathe through the mouths. That creates a whole nother slew of issues, which I have a whole chapter in the Align method around, why that is. We can talk about it. Um, that's vastly different than breathing air inside of a, whatever, an office building or something.
Mm.
So, normalcy as a whole in most modern worlds is a little funky, and statistically speaking, it's not really going in the best direction. And so it takes you as a listener or like a human to be smarter than normal. Like normal
Mm.
is, I'm saying this in a kind of absolute way, is like is pretty whack.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess maybe I take back my idea that I don't speak enough. It's like generally speaking, normal's pretty whack. Like it's not that cool.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, shoot, like we're in this normal thing. It's a little weird. So simple stuff that a person can do would be like, bring more nature into your house, bring more
Mm.
plants into your house, open windows more often, do walking meetings with people, go outside. If you have a bunch of phone calls, take them outside. Don't do freaking Zoom calls. Like
Mm.
just fucking talk, or do a Zoom call on your phone,
Mm.
and get your headset set up and go for a walk.
Mm.
And while you're looking, you don't necessarily even need to look into the screen the whole time, because when you're myopically focusing your vision, your eyes are continuous with your central nervous system. They're regulating and augmenting your autonomic state. When you're focused in, you're putting yourself more into sympathetic type
Mm.
state, which is, it's great. There's nothing wrong with the sympathetic state, more like fight, flight, ready to go. But many people their foot is kind of stuck on the gas pedal,
Mm.
being like that sympathetic go. And so when you're staring into a box, a blue lit box, an alternating current blue lit box, so it's like flipping like a flare essentially,
Mm.
or not a flare. What flips like a strobe light,
Mm.
just so fast that you can't see it. And it's this, you could call it like junk light, version
Mm.
of light coming out of this
Yeah.
thing. And you're contracting the called the ciliary muscles and various different muscles that actually contract the lens in your eyes to be able to bend that
Mm.
light so it comes in clear. So you're
Mm.
actually making muscular strain to like look into this little box. It's like,
Mm.
bro, just go outside, look up, like look up in some trees, look up at some clouds. That also stimulates creativity. It stimulates more energy when you just look up compared to looking down. It's like very like not a big deal,
Mhm.
to just make these subtle little micro shifts in your day-to-day life is like super simple. And
Mm.
that's the function of the Align method. Is it's our tagline is, moving. We just changed it recently. It used to be make fitness who you are, not a thing that you do. Now I think we're changing it to like moving well through life, something
Mm.
like that. But all that stuff, general sentiment. Ida Rolf has a thing, or a quote. She said, the way you walk through a room is the way you walk through your life.
Mm.
So if you're which this comes back to kind of like the body language stuff, but it's simple little adjustments that we can do in our day-to-day lives that really do add up, and I think make the biggest difference. It's just a matter of, you gotta freaking pay attention. If you're not willing to
Mm.
pay attention, if you're not willing to like become more sovereign in your
Mm.
decision making of the way that you inhabit yourself,
Mm.
you will probably get jacked up. Statistically speaking, that's not an absolute. You'll probably get jacked up though. So it's just like, you
Mm.
just gotta pay attention. And then the stuff to shift is like so darn simple. And that was the whole function of the Align method.
There's the question I do really want to talk about the parasympathetic and the sympathetic because that's kind of where my awareness is resting at the moment in a lot of things. But the question before that is you mentioned breathing. I know from the book, it's, when you're discussing things as first principles as sleep, breathe, there's a whole chapter dedicated to play, sunlight,
Mm-hmm.
eating whole foods, moving, community, being active in nature. These are they all feel really good when I hear them. They all feel really accessible when I hear them as well, which is obviously why I'm a big fan of your work. Um, but I also know that when people tune into it, it lacks the I hate to say this, the sex appeal. Do you know what I mean? For these first
Mm.
principles things, how do you come? Like, do you struggle with that a little bit in your line of work, or people come to you prepared and ready to go? Like, how do you? I don't want to say sell people on sleeping better, breathing better, playing better. Is it just the awareness that you invite them into and go, hey, the choice is yours at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Similar to the
I
conversation
could, I
we've
mean, I
just
could
had.
probably be a better salesman in most ways. I don't think I'm a very good salesman, but I think that I I would say you as an individual, if people aren't asking you questions about what you're doing, you
Mm,
probably don't need to be telling people what to do.
mm.
So it's like, okay,
Let
how do we
them.
sell these ideas? It's like,
Yep.
fucking just be it.
Mm,
And if people are like, bro, what are you doing?
mm.
Then it probably maybe
It's for
make a
them.
little pamphlet about it, maybe make a
It's for
blog
them.
about it, maybe make an
Yep.
Instagram post about it and like share, but I don't feel the necessity to like obviously sales is a part of most aspects of life. It's just a part
Mm,
of evolution.
mm,
Peacock is selling themselves for sexual selection.
mm,
So but I think I would lean more towards just like I'm gonna keep on doing what I'm doing, and when people are interested because it seems to be working, then I will open up what I'm doing and say, oh, it's all in the book. Oh, it's
and
all
it's
in
really
this
and it's
YouTube
really
video.
this
It's all in
simple.
this
Yep.
I created a whole 6-week program that
Mm,
launches early January,
mm,
hint hint. That I'm super excited about
mm,
that, because that to me is like most everything that I have found to be valuable from an exercise and movement and mobility
mm,
perspective, which is what I get asked about the most, is like, cool, like how do we actually put this together into our training, and
mm,
building our bodies. I finally created that after being essentially being semi pounded to create something like that for a long time, and I just haven't for some reason.
mm,
So that's something that I'm really excited about, is like if people are interested based off of the pudding,
mm,
of like what I'm creating with myself, with clients, with people that are following the program, and it's interesting, then great. But if
mm,
not, then I probably don't have any business sharing about it,
mm.
honestly. Like it's like work on yourself. Be so good that you become undeniable is something that I learned from somebody,
Mhm.
as opposed to just working on how I can, sell bullshit.
Got
Be
it.
so good that it's like when people are asking you questions, like you're probably onto something. If
Mm.
nobody's asking you questions, maybe work harder, or
I
like
love
work
it.
different.
Yeah, I love it because, and the thing that strikes up for me is no one's watching you hip hinge, no one's watching you necessarily floor sit all the time, but they watch your movement and the way that you are with yourself, and potentially that's the inspiring piece. So I'm conscious of how much time we've got left here today, but I would love to dive into 5 key movements that you share. Sitting on the
Hmm.
floor, nasal
Hmm.
breathing, hip hinging, hanging, walking in nature, in any particular order. You did mention nasal breathing before. Maybe we start there. The importance of nasal breathing, bro.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So you're the way our bodies are structured to breathe through our nose.
Mm,
In the book we break down via I had a buddy called Patrick McEwen help with revising the nose breathing section. I had Brian McKenzie, all sorts of like the greats in the world of these conversations helped out, which I'm really
mm,
grateful for. So I borrowed the gear system from Brian, which is like a system of breathing, where it's like ideally we're staying in what they'd call like first gear, which is pretty easy nasal breathing in and out. And then you can raise it up to second gear, which comes harder nasal breathing in and out. And then eventually you go up into like nasal breathing in, exhaling through the mouth. Eventually you get up to fifth gear, and it's like, hard breathing in through the mouth, out through the mouth. But you're
right.
always trying to modulate yourself back down to like whatever the activity I'm doing, I'm trying to breathe through the nose. As you're breathing through the reason you want to do that is because one, your nose is built to filter the air, it's built to humidify the air, it's built to regulate the temperature of the air. It has tens of specific functions just to breathing.
Mm,
Whereas your mouth, if you're breathing through your mouth, it's can be very challenging for actually the structure of your jaw,
mm,
the crowding of teeth. Your tongue acts as a natural retainer for your maxilla or your upper palate. When you're pressing the tongue up to the roof of your mouth throughout the day and you're breathing through your nose, you're creating this subtle outward pressure on your cranium,
mm,
on your maxilla. So if a child, for example, grows up and they're not breathing through their nose with regularity, they're going to start to have this collapse of their jawline. And that's something. There's an interesting book on this is called Jaws that people could look up.
Mm.
I forget the author. There was a forward from Robert Sapolsky, and a really meaningful book, but it gets just all into really this specifically, how it affects your facial muscles and structure.
Mm-hmm.
There's another book called Shut Your Mouth, Save Your Life. That was written by, I think his name's called George Catlin. It was like a couple hundred years ago. And
Mm.
he was observing, I think he was a lawyer originally, and he was also an artist. And he was observing Native Americans compared to the colonials and noticing like all these colonial people, they're like, these amazing, bright, futuristic, correct beings, and then there's this the brutal savages of the Native Americans, but they have these white teeth, and they have these really like well oriented teeth and great jaw lines, and
Mm.
it's like, what the hell is going on? And then one of the things that was interesting called, they said that the Native Americans said that the reason that the white man's teeth were dark, were black, and they had some name for the mouth being black because it was open. So when it's
Mm.
open, it's like black. They said it was because of the lies that come out of their mouth, which is kind of another interesting thing. But there was a shift towards obviously changing diet, which is a big thing as well.
Mm.
So within that, you're going to be, if you grow up in some more ancestral environment, you're probably going to be eating like tougher foods and meats and
Mhm.
things of the sort. So you're going to be really using your jaws. But you're also going to be, from a young age, one of the things the Native Americans do, and any smart culture, if the child would open their mouth, the mother would shut the mouth to really drive the air through the nose.
Mm.
Their sleeping position was such that it would put the neck in a subtle flexion to kind of subtly like close the mouth. All that stuff starts breeding the body and grooming the body
Such an
to
early stage.
have
Yeah.
healthy respiratory function. If you're a person that's not doing that from a young age, something that I would recommend, something that I've done almost every day for the last like 3 years, that you're hearing about more in the last recent. Not that I'm like claiming any claim to, I was doing it first, because I definitely wasn't. But taping your mouth, just get some medical tape. You don't need to buy anything, fancy product or
Mm.
whatever. Just get yourself a little medical tape, just put it right over the lips, like
Mm.
literally like a half an inch right over the lips, whatever that is in centimeters. And I'm American. Sorry. So put that over the lips, and
Mm.
while you're sleeping, and that's going to be huge for sleep gains. So
Mm.
every breath you're taking through your nose, it's going through this whole labyrinth through it's called the turbinates,
Mm.
or the nasal concha, and
Mm.
essentially going through this labyrinth
Mm.
of through your nasal cavity, that's releasing nitric oxide as it's going through that passageway, and it's doing the filtration, the humidification, all the things. Like, you have a factory for breathing in your face called your nose. Your
Mm.
mouth is built for eating with eating food. That's it.
Mm.
Or being in a place where you really need to get like air quick. But when you're breathing through your mouth, it's much less efficient. And most
Mm.
of that air, you'll notice, you're not going to get like that slow, deep breath where the ribs expand out horizontally and you're really filling the lower lobes of the lungs, which that's
Mm.
the highest surface area of the lungs. You're actually more filling the top portion, which is just this tiny little cone at the top of the chest. So the lungs get the smallest at the top, and they get the biggest at the bottom. So when you're breathing through your mouth, you're gonna be filling up more of that small space. You can get air quick, which is nice, but you're actually getting less air.
Mm.
So just breathe through your nose. It's good for you. It'll be the short of that.
The takeaway.
Yeah.
One of my favorites is I've started doing this for the last 12 months and I've really been enjoying it. And I know I've got so much more further to go, is hanging. Just hanging
Oh
off a
yeah.
bar.
Mhm.
When I first started, like 5 seconds was a bitch, to be honest. It was
Oh
just like to
really?
get up. Yeah,
Oh,
man, it
that's
was
good
hard.
honesty.
5 to 10 seconds was like I'd be
Hmm.
hanging there and like everything would just be like, stop. And then I just kept I kept having to do it in reps. But now I'm at a
Mm.
solid 90 seconds. Like I can just sort of hang there
Oh
for 90
good.
seconds and it feels really good. But even
That's a
then,
good
like
test.
my forearms and I can really feel my lats. And now I've sort of started working with like, moving,
9 seconds is hard.
changing the grips. But yeah,
Yeah.
hanging, the benefits of hanging. Like I feel like I am a monkey, so it suits me. But
Yeah.
um, Yeah.
Well, monkey would be a misnomer. So monkeys actually have much narrower collarbones, and so they're way more deficient from a hanging perspective. So you'd be
Mm.
more like a orangutan or a gorilla or a gibbon or something of the sort. So
I'll
the
take
length of
gorilla.
your collarbones, the structure of your hands, all of the things, like you are like a monkey, it wouldn't be able to reach with their right hand over and touch their left ear, from my understanding. I haven't spent that much time with
Mm.
monkeys, but I've heard that. So and that's based off of just the orthopometry, you could say, or like the anatomy of the shoulder girdle.
Mhm.
So that's kind of interesting. The human is actually really built to hang, structurally
Mm.
speaking, which is interesting. And one of the things that's nice about that is I really love simple, overarching, like shotgun solutions for a lot of
Mm.
things. Hanging, obviously, again, maybe not obvious, but it lengthens the space around the ribs, around the heart, all the visceral tissue, or the organs, the guts. Just having a little, like a decompression of
Mm.
that stuff. When I hang, I usually have these like semi-violent chunking sounds of my spine going pop, 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 like coming into
Mm.
better alignment, which is very pleasant for me. If it's overly violent and like painful, maybe like, see a doctor. But for me, it's like in my thoracic spine, it's something that feels very good. That's a very common thing to get some decompression in the spine. But also, there's a whole book other than the Align method. Um, I just have a chapter in my book where I pretty much like highlight most
Mm.
of the stuff from this other book called Shoulder Pain by a guy called Dr. John Kirsch. And in that book, he was an orthopedic surgeon, and he found that, I believe he says, like 98% of his patients that he was going to treat for shoulder impingement syndrome, they were actually going to like get a surgery, were totally healed, quote unquote, healed or relieved of pain just by going through a really basic hanging protocol, which is like 90 seconds a
Mm.
day. I don't know how many days he did. It was like 7 to 10 days or so. And then there was some rehabilitatory exercises that would go along with that.
Mhm.
So super simple. What's happening is you're doing that is you're literally changing the structure and the shape of the shoulder girdle. There's an area called the coracoacromial arch that starts to kind of close down and
Mm.
impede your ability to get overhead range of motion with the
Mm.
shoulder. And when you're just going into that subtle hanging position, you're just starting to open that space around that arch and just really starting to subtly massage open the architecture of the shoulder girdle, which is good. And then
Mm.
that's when you bring your arms back down, you have spaciousness in your shoulders. So now you're not as inclined to being like, forward head posture and hunching over um, and minimizing your capacity for breath. Your respiratory function is gonna get better. Just does all the things. Like life is so damn easy in so many ways. And that's the whole function of the Align method stuff. Is I'm just like, bro, like you don't need P90X, you don't need some
Mm.
total movement modality dogma ideology thing.
Mhm.
It's like there's subtle little things that we can do as a baseline, that if you're not doing the baseline stuff, I just don't care about your hormone replacement, or I don't care
Mm.
about your Olympic weightlift. Well, you're probably not Olympic weightlifting if you're not doing some of the baseline, because Olympics, it's very like high level challenging feat.
Mm.
Although you could be doing Olympic weightlifting just jacking yourself up, I guess. But I don't care about your bodybuilding. I don't care about your. I love it for you, but I'm like, bro, you need to take more walks outside in the sun.
Mm.
You need to have more. Pay attention to the way you interact with community.
Mhm.
What's like the sensation of purpose that you have in your life? Like, are you doing something that actually feels meaningful? You're gonna
Mm.
die at some point. Like, why not start reorienting yourself to something you actually care about? Are you sitting on a chair inside of a artificially blue lit freaking alternating current strobe light thing
Mhm.
for 9 hours of the day,
Mhm.
staring into a box into oblivion? um and then you're getting high at night to regulate, and then you're jacked up on coffee because you're tired, and then you drink a martini after work because you to decompress, and then you pop a few whatever they do, like Adderalls throughout the day to stay focused in the office because you're staring at the screen and everything in your body saying like, stop doing this. You're like, another Adderall. You're like
Mm.
locked in.
Mm.
So there's so many, and nothing against anybody that's whatever you're doing with your life, but I think like instead of just work harder, do
Mm.
hard things, you're not working hard enough. Sometimes there's also value in winding back and saying, like, what am I doing
Mhm.
exactly? And do I actually care about any of this? And you can start to wind that back a little bit. Then you're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, all right, I actually look forward to exercising, quote unquote, exercising because I like it. Like I
Mhm.
found something that actually makes me feel good,
Mhm.
or I'm intentionally exercising with a friend. I found a friend. Maybe I don't have any friends. I found somebody on the internet. I put a
Mm.
post up at the gym, like looking for a workout buddy, want accountability.
Mhm.
Like somebody would probably be like, me too, bro. Like I need accountability.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of little things that a person can do. And I think oftentimes many people feel, I think, hopeless. I've felt hopeless before. I think that coming into that place of really just assessing and like, what the hell am I doing here, and do I actually care about any of this?
Mhm.
And if not, then let's fucking figure out, like, what do you care about?
Mm.
And so let's start making time for more of that.
Mhm.
And some of that is to cultivate the energy to start for the gears to function in a way that's not maybe so depressive or angsty, would be like the simple things: get outside, get out for a walk, look up into the clouds, look up into the trees. You can spend some time hanging each day. That's going to change your postural patterns, open up some space in your lungs. You could spend some time on the ground, like
Mhm.
we're having this conversation. I have my area here, you know, it looks semi-professional. I've got a nice microphone, I've got all the things, I've got a backdrop, got a little bokeh camera situation. You
Mm.
wouldn't know that I've been going through yoga positions this whole time. I'm in a 90-90 position right now. I was in
Mm.
a straddle position a second ago. I was in a sukhasana position before that. So I'm
Mm.
like mobilizing my shit
Mm.
as we're having this conversation. I also have a window right behind me. I'm
Mm.
not really looking at the computer that often. Like
Mm.
anytime you're talking, I just look out the window and listen to you. I'm
Mm.
not saying like I'm the pedestalized, like, do what I do. I'm just saying, like, here's an example. It's
Simple
really
access
it's really
points.
not that big of a deal.
Mm.
And you wouldn't notice.
Mhm.
It's not like, oh my, I can't look out a window while I'm working. It's like, you probably can. I can do a walking meeting. Like, you probably can, man. Like
Yeah.
you'd be like an innovator at your office where you're like,
Mm.
hey guys, like I'm noticing, morale's been a little low. I'm noticing, we're getting a little fat.
Mm.
It's not okay.
Mm.
Let's start changing the culture up a little bit.
Mm.
So we're gonna do walking meetings now. People will be like, oh, yeah, like I would love that.
Mm.
But it's changing sometimes not that easy, or it doesn't seem that easy, but it's, I think easier than it actually seems.
One of my favorite quotes from your book is actually the evolution of our future depends on those of us who are willing to do things differently. Now, I want to
Mm.
tune in there, Aaron. So you mentioned you've mentioned a lot, and I know that stacking these 1% beneficial, like stacking these 1% sort of first principles, things that we know that are really good for ourselves, can be so helpful for us. But also, you mentioned community, you mentioned accountability. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on in Gen? So you've got 6 weeks where people all across the world can come together to sort of
Oh
do
yeah.
this together, bro.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, so we this is something I've been working on very intentionally for like the last probably 7 months,
Mm.
and less intentionally kind of thinking of like the programming and the outline, all that stuff, for much longer than that. But we have the Align Method online program. It's a 6-week program, and the first launch will be actually in a guided community. So we're going to
Hmm.
be, each week we're going to do live calls. People can ask me questions, interact, engage, share your experience, and that will go through each 6 week, and then we'll save those calls at the end so other people can be able to tune into that. And it'll be launching in early January, so the beginning of the new year.
Hmm.
First week is completely free, so
Mm.
I would recommend people just starting off and just doing the free first week, so that
Mm.
way you can get what I call a movement baseline. So you
Mm.
go through various different movement assessments, all the major joints in your body, and you're like, cool, like, where am I at? I think that's a
Dope.
really invaluable place for people to be like, just where am I at? Like, dude, like I
Mm.
don't even know how I move.
Hmm. Hmm.
What's my shoulder supposed to, like, I just don't know. Like, I think
Mm.
it feels okay.
Mm.
So that would be the first thing. And then I break down what I describe as foundational movement or mobility fundamentals. So it's, I think, 4 or 5 different techniques that just everybody ought to know how to do. They're very simple, very straightforward. Any physical therapist or good manual therapist would probably do them with you. So that's the first week, completely free. And people can, if they want to check that out, they can go to alignpodcast.com/AMP for Align Method Program. So alignpodcast.com AMP. And we'll be accepting 500 people into the first run. So it's definitely going to fill up, which I'm excited about. But people can jump on the waiting list for that, and then we'll notify you as soon as it goes out.
Amazing. I'll put a link to that in the show notes below. And again, man, like, I just really want to thank you. Like I said, I could have blitzed through your book, but I stopped where I found myself being met by the book in a really deep way, and just going,
Cool.
You know what, I'm gonna just pause here and continue to do this work. I, for one, am going to sign up, at least at the very least,
man.
for the first week, like you said, to just sort of get a gauge of where I'm at.
Yeah, so
and
the
what
first
my
week.
body's doing.
Stop after
at the very least, and then,
Yeah.
but I can see myself. I'm already like into like, okay, how do I get this just moving with greater joy and ease? One of the exercises you have early on in the book is to visualize like an emotion that you really want to just be carrying through life as an intention, and for me it was one as simple as joy, and it was like, I just want to move joyfully. And I'm actually quite joyous by nature, touch wood, in general, but I do get these little niggles, and like I said, I can be quite stiff at times, and it's like, but that doesn't reflect joy, the stiffness. So I'm with curiosity, I know I can go into that deeper. So yeah, I'm happy to explore where that could potentially take me. So thanks again, man, and I really appreciate you taking the time and energy to be here present with us today to answer some of these questions, and inspiring how our posture reflects our performance, reflects our entire walk in life, and how we come across with people. And yeah, man, just it's a lifetime's work that you've put into this. As you can tell, the book is so well researched, man. Thank you so much for doing this with us here today.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And then if people want to go into the other stuff, just type Align Podcast in the internet. That's the Instagram and the YouTube and the podcast, obviously. So
you'll find plenty of stuff there. Man, Aaron, thank you so much for your time and energy here again today. And Inspired Evolution Tribe audience, thank you so much for tuning in. It is such a pleasure to be your brother, walking by your side on this journey, being inspired to evolve. I'll see you in the next one. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, leave us a comment. And if you want to stay in tune for new episodes launching every Monday, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay inspired to evolve.